Hello everybody, how are we all? In this tutorial we're going to look at how we can use Python and C to solve a pyramid of numbers, which is a task which you may even get asked on an interview one day, so it's worth knowing. So pyramid of numbers, as you can see, 1 at the top, next row 2 and 3, next row 4, 5, 6 and so on. Typically you'll see this example only going up to 10. There's a reason for that. Once you get past 10 you end up with the columns being offset because of the double-digit numbers, and the whole thing becomes a lot more complicated and it ceases to be an educational exercise and it ends up becoming a fully blown program. So without further ado, let's carry on. There you see a zoomed in view, and next, the agenda. We're going to look at a preview of the final code in a second. Then we're going to look at how we can identify the variables that we're going to need for our code. I'll show you the Python code. Then we'll look at the C code. You'll see some similarities, which is good. You'll see some differences. Whether you're interested in writing C code or not, the purpose of this video is to understand the core approach to solving the problem. After that, I'll drop some hints and a link to the code on GitHub. So here we go, spoiler alert. Python code consists of one function and then the main body of the code. As you can see, we've got some variables here which store the pyramid height, the row number, and so on. So I'm not being a teacher, but you will learn more if you attempt to try this, so it's worth having a go yourself. Don't just skip to the solution and think, oh yeah, I know how to do it now. You do need to try it. Variables, so pyramid height, all rows high, start row, so we need to keep track of the start row because we need to refer back to that and increment it by 1. Columns, so columns is the number of digits wide, and obviously that grows the lower down the pyramid you get, the wider it gets towards the base. It's the previous row number, so the start that is just number 1, and we'll use that. You'll see where that gets used further on. Spaces, that's to help with the indentation, so as you get lower down the indentation gets less. And here we go, write a function to print a row. Now, just in isolation, this probably won't make much sense, so this is probably why it's good to have a go yourself. The overall approach to solving this problem is to write a function which prints a row. You need to print the row separately from the main body, because otherwise, if you run 2 for loops, you'll end up with 4 rows, but each row will end up with 4 things in it. It'll be a mess. You want a triangle, remember the triangle shape. So here you can see for I in range 0 to cols. So that's the number of columns wide. The number of columns wide is also the same as the number of rows down. So when you're on the third row, you've got 3 columns. When you're on the 4th row, you've got 4 columns. So that's very important. And that's part of understanding the problem. Understand that as the number of rows increases, each row, the number of each row is the same as the number of digits it contains. If we count 10 as being a digit, should have said numbers. Okay, next. So this is the main body of the code. For the row number in range, start row to pyramid height plus 1, because if we've got 4 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, we need to actually do the 4th one. And start row, because start row is already number 1, in an ideal world that would have been 0, but it's much easier to call your start row row 1 and then just add the 1 onto the end of the pyramid height. So then we set the columns equal to the row number. So whatever your language you're solving this in, whether it's C or Python, this core approach remains the same. So columns, for instance on the 3rd row, columns would be equal to 3. And then we have maxnum. Maxnum is the maximum number on each row. And that is actually a product of the current row number plus the last digit from the previous row. Think about that. So when you're on the 3rd row, for instance, The maximum number on the third row will be 6. So that actually is the row number, which is 3, plus the maximum number from the previous row, which is 3. So 3 plus 3 equals 6. Again, you need to try this rather than just look at me trying to explain it. We'll do a demo in a second, by the way. Okay. So in brief, that was how to solve it. You have your main body of your code, which runs vertically, and then you have a function which works out the horizontal part. So it constructs the row, which will then be printed to your screen. Okay, so C. If you're not familiar with C, there's a thing called a prototype, which is where you describe the function above the main code, and then you write the function after the main code. So that's what this void makerow in end row val int row is. So again, we're tracking the row number and the end row val, which is, I think it was, it was max num in my Python code. I wrote the code a few hours apart, or maybe a day apart, so the variables aren't the same between the code, but the underlying principle is. And here we go. We're running a for loop inside our main code, which is calling a function called makerow. Makerow, again, it iterates through the row, but what it does is it takes, because we've worked out what the end row value is, we need to work backwards, because otherwise you'll end up with 654 on a row, whereas really you need 456. So this is what we do here, and we iterate through each value in the row. So in the current row, we'll iterate through 456, and then we'll subtract row minus I, which is the returnable. Okay, so a couple of hints, well, 5 hints. What we need to do is break down the problem. So really breaking down the problem here is actually working out how to print the row, and then how to use that function within the body of your main code. So you need to keep track of the row, and you need to keep track of columns within that row. So you're dealing with two things there. You're dealing with columns and you're dealing with rows. So that's why you've got 2 for loops. But don't run 2 for loops within the main function. You could try it, but you'll find that if you try and do that, you'll end up with, for instance, if you tried running 2 for loops in your main function and you were doing 4 rows, you'd end up with 4 columns per row. That's why you need to keep function to work out your row. If it's not happening for you, doing it with numbers to start with, try just printing the asterisks to the screen, because that gets you part of the way there. Once you've got that working with probably just your main function, then you can create a separate function to do the asterisks. And once you've got the asterisks printing in a triangle, then you can go back and modify your function to actually print the real numbers. And if you're familiar with the debugger, then by all means use that. This is the code in C, and as you can see, no pun intended, that is the output. And if I'd done one more row, so I've got a variable called size. So in C, it's a define, so I've defined it. It's global, so it can be used throughout the code. There we go. If I'd made size equal to, here it was 4, but if I'd made size equal to 5, then we would have had 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. But the trouble is, it would have made the triangle go a little bit lopsided. There's ways of fixing that, but it would just mean a lot more code, and it's not what we want to be doing here. So here we have the code side by side. So that's the that's the C code. There we go, size equals to size is 4. So that's define. That's, don't confuse define with constants. If you want to learn C, then just make sure you learn. the difference between define and constant. Constant is always a number, whereas size could actually be anything. It's just dropping in a number or a value into your code. So it's not actually a variable. It's just effectively it's just a block of text, or you've still got to tell the code what it actually is. So here it's number 4, and throughout the code it will be 4 plus 1, which equals 5. There it's 4. So we're dealing with integers throughout here. So if I put quotes around that, it would have broke. Python code, there we see it again. So it's the other way around compared to the C code, because the C code you've got the main body, then you've got the function, whereas here you've got the function first and then the main body. Just two different ways of doing it with two different lots of code, but here we go. For I in range 0 to columns. So this is what's doing the horizontal bit, and then that's what's going vertically down from the start row down to effectively what is the end row, or up to the end row. And then it's printing, and then we get a nice triangle to the screen. So if you want to see the code, it's on RGGH GitHub page, and then there you see the link. I'll put it down below as well in the description, because you don't really want to be able to type all that. Okay, and don't forget to subscribe, because algos. Right, so that's wrapped that up. Let's go over and look at some code now. So over on VS Code, let's first look at the Python example. Okay, so this is a Python version, and this is the same code that you can get from GitHub. We've got our variables at the start. These are effectively global. Then we've got def print row. So that's the print row function, which prints the row as we iterate down through them in our main body of code. Now, this is a type of project or code that you may need to use a debugger for. So I've already got it started here. Let me just, in VS Code, if you want to, I've just run it. Let me get rid of that. So start with, most of you will have something looking a bit like this with your file explorer on the right hand side. So yeah, just go to run, start debugging, and you may have to wait a second or two. And provided you've got Code Runner extension installed, which I would recommend, then here we go. You can watch your variables as you cycle through them. So let's go. So here we can see columns is equal to 1, pyramid height is equal to 4. Sorry, I'm pointing, that's not very helpful, is it? Then previous is 1, spaces is 0, start row equals 1. And then as we need to step into the function. So as we step through, you can see these values changing. You can see spaces now equals 3. It was 4 to start with, wasn't it? Because you have 4 spaces before you get to the number 1. Then on the second row, you have 3 spaces before you get to the 2 and the 3. And then, as you'll see in a second, you'll have 2 spaces before you get to the 4, 5, 6. So I'm just stepping through this one by one. And to create you just click on here to create a watch point. Sorry, a breakpoint. And there we go. So keep stepping through previous row number, spaces, and hopefully we'll see spaces is now down to 2. So that means we're on the penultimate line. There we see that's the 2 and the 3 row. Keep going. And spaces is now down to 1. And we've got 4, 5, and 6. And obviously the final row, the 7, 8, 9, 10 will have no spaces because, let me just make it a little bit bigger. Oh, and it's actually doing it on the screen as well in as we see it, it's doing it in terminal. And there we go, we should be nearly at the end. Could just run through it, to be honest. There we go. So 7, 8, 9, 10. So they're on no spaces, whereas at the start, if we look there, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's actually 5. I would need to go back and check why we've got 5. I would have expected 4, but we still get a triangle. It's probably because I've added the spaces there, and I've added it there, so I think we've ended up with an extra space at the start. Not to worry. This is the Python version, and I've just kind of shown you how to step through the debugger. Next, let's create a new file, and I'm just going to go across to the GitHub page. And if you don't want to go through all the fuss of cloning something on GitHub, you can just do raw. So you click on, so if I did that too quick, just click on raw here, and then you can do Control-A, Control-C, and paste that in. And this is the C version, which should also make a pyramid. And let's run that, just check it works. Okay, so I was going to debug this in C, but gave up in the end. So yeah, just to wrap up, I'm going to just show you quickly where you can find all this code on GitHub. And yeah, please subscribe, like, thumbs up and all that, and see you next time. Okay, so if you want any of this code, I've done some code where I've done the Python and the C equivalent in this GitHub repository. So feel free to come in here and download it, copy it, modify it to what you need to. There we have it. Code to write a pyramid in Python and in C. I skipped over the debugging in C because it's a minefield, and I don't really want to get involved in Windows debugging when I do most of my code on Linux and VS Code in Linux, which I can really recommend. Anyway, that's it for now. Please give me a thumbs up. Any samples of your own code would be welcome. Post down below in the comments. And yeah, any comments, thumbs up, subscribe, all that next time. Thank you.